again. This week, we're talking about gender and probably to a lesser degree about sexuality as they enter into our view of our history and our literature. I can show you in just one moment why we need to talk about gender and the way we treat it. To do this, I'm going to take a little jaunt over into English literature, but, still, I'm not discriminatory in that way. In 1740, Samuel Richardson published the epistolary novel Pamela. It tells the story of a poor but honest young woman who receives the unwanted attention of her aristocratic, rich, and handsome master. Pamela holds out, maintaining her virtue until her pursuer caves and marries her. In the meantime, there are some few hundred pages of him coercing, threatening, manhandling, bribing, and kidnapping her, driving the girl to her wits but not her virtue's end. 2 years later, while Pamela was still an amazing, sensational must-read across the UK, Henry Fielding published a satirical riff he called Joseph Andrews. Pamela's last name was Andrews, so Joseph is posed as her brother. The plot is, in most essentials, exactly the same as it is in Richardson's novel, with the exception that Joseph is the poor but honest one who is being pursued by a lecherous, beautiful, and rich noblewoman who schemes to have him at all costs, while the young man is determined to preserve his purity. In a nutshell, the fact that we can clearly see why one situation would be considered funny, while the other, melodramatic though it is, borders on tragic, is all the proof I need to show that gender still matters for us, very much as it did for Richardson, Fielding, and the rest of the 18th century. The thing is, much as with our little venture into labor, class, and everything Marxist, talking about feminism can be a divisive thing. Make no mistake, it is feminism we are talking about. Feminist critics are the folks who brought gender to the party, and so much has been published under their banner we have no choice but to defer. In my experience, I'll regularly have students who will shy away from the subject, despite the clear need to discuss the roles played in a narrative which depend on gender, and, importantly, the audience's understanding of gender. Think of every story you've ever heard which resolves in a couple marrying or pledging to marry. Every one of those depends on the subtext of a social construct designed to reference gender and the legally recognized obligations which are specific to them. Or, to be topical, think of the high fantasy we just witnessed the stilted culmination of in Game of Thrones. Everything devolves there to the struggles of three powerful women and the forces they control. And in the end, it's resolved by dominion being handed over to a man. So I think that probably matters. In week 2 of our class, we read The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. Now, I'd like you to think carefully about all the male characters in that book. The closest to realization as full characters, as more than fringe or passing mention, are the most monstrous. Does it matter that female characters displace the males in that book, filling the center stage for Morrison's narrative? Does it matter that there are no comparable monstrous women in Morrison's book? And my answer to that is yes, of course. And I'll go further. It matters whether a male author depicts such a thing in distinction to when a female author does. That is nothing less than the truth. So, my advice is embrace it. This week, we're going to be discussing gender depictions, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts. We also have a one-of-a-kind special assignment for the class. You're asked to produce a teaching aid in the form of a PowerPoint presentation. You're to look at gender in the primary sources you've selected in your milestone project and use those as your representative texts. Needless to say, gender might not be what you had in mind when you picked them, but that doesn't mean that you can't insert that view now as a little practice in playing with the texts. I'll have some guiding suggestions in my announcements about this project, but as usual, if you have questions, you know how to get in contact with me. Please do. All right? Till next week, we'll say that's it for now. Okay? Enjoy!